Okay, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you might be. My name is Mark Adams. I coordinate ASIC's Innovation Hub, and here you are at our regular Regtech Quarterly Liaison Forum. And I'm simply just going to do a little bit of housekeeping just now before the welcome and opening comment from Danielle, Press Commissioner from ASIC. So just a reminder, this is being recorded. Your microphones won't be working. The Teams chat is working. That's the best place to ask questions at any point. So please make use of that during the sessions, and we'll pause at various points to sort of see where questions are at, and then there's an opportunity at the end as well. So please make use of that. There won't be a raise hand function, so just bear that in mind as well. So I think without further ado, I'm going to pass to Danielle, Press to welcome and start the meeting.
Mark, thank you very much and welcome everybody. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which we meet today across the country and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to First Nations people here today. So I'm Danielle, Press. I think Mark mentioned, I am pleased to welcome you all to our final Regtech Liaison Forum for this year. Amazing how fast 2022 has gone. We appreciate very much your ongoing participation and engagement in these forums. They are designed to help support meaningful collaboration and information sharing and to promote some opportunities for innovation across the Regtech sector, and we do very much appreciate your time and participation. We are also very much looking forward to delivering more of these in 2023. Oh, I'm getting text saying people don't have audio. I'm hoping some people can hear me. Mark, can you nod at me? Okay, great.
I can hear you.
Awesome. I look forward to delivering more of these. We look forward to doing more of these in 2023, and hopefully we'll be able to do some in a hybrid format where we can see some of you in person. So if I look at the agenda, the Regtech sector has continued to experience real growth in 2022. And in KPMG's recent Australian FinTech Survey report, it was identified as one of the sectors that features the highest number of Australian firms and are likely to be an area that will continue to attract significant investment in coming years. I think that's really exciting. It points to a steady demand of enhanced regulatory technology to streamline processes and improve compliance capability. And it's clear from the results that of the report that the digital innovation is at the forefront of the strategic priorities for many Australian firms. And ASIC is no exception to that. Our digital and data transformation is a key part of what we're thinking of our strategic priorities in our corporate plan over the next 5 years. And it really thinks about how we become a digitally informed regulator by 2030. Our participation in the Business Research and Innovation Initiative Regtech Roundtable, wow, that's a mouthful, is ongoing, and the next proof of concept stage is beginning shortly. So ASIC's challenge was to require participating firms to develop technology that helped us analyse corporate disclosure and hopefully other data sets to identify and access compliance by listed companies. The successful solution has a potential to transform our ability to harness technology to reduce regulatory burden, which is critically important, while still enhancing market integrity. The outcome could substantially enhance our supervisory capability and specifically identifying and assessing poor conduct in corporate disclosure. 4 of the 5 Regtechs who were selected to conduct the feasibility study of the solution are joining us here today, and they're going to share some of their experience in participating in the government program, which we look forward to. So I'd like to thank Listcorp, Digitalx, Pyxta and DHI-AI for their participation in the roundtable and to discuss some of the challenges, benefits and learnings from the program. While Bedrock AI regrettably couldn't join us here today in person, they have provided some written comments separately, which Mark will weave into the discussion, I'm sure, when we get to that. We're currently awaiting an update from the Department of Industry, Science and Resources on the status of the next stage of the BRII program, which is currently undergoing a government review. We're excited to work with 2 RegTech firms that are selected to proceed to the proof of concept phase once it's announced. Evie, Redshaw and Vaughn Cotton from the Consumer, then we'll move to Evie, Redshaw and Vaughn Cotton from the Consumer Data Rights Division at the ACCC, and they'll provide us with a CDR program recently expanded and roll out through the energy sector. Again, nice and controversial. Following this, Deborah Young from RegTech Association will provide an industry update, and she's joined by Ben Hobby from the Objective Cooperation to share some insights from their recent Government Regulatory Technology Survey. Again, looking forward to that. We have an opportunity for Q&A at the end. Again, I think Mark went through the way we do that through our presenter chat, so please send through any questions. So in closing, and before we get on to the more interesting stuff than me talking, I'd like to thank presenters here today for taking the time to share these important insights to our RegTech community. Thank you to our audience. Your ongoing engagement with our various forums is key for us to foster productive, innovative sharing and discussion. And we will have another RegTech meetup event scheduled for the 1st for November. And I encourage you to visit the Innovation Hub website or subscribe to our mailing list. There's the plug for the latest updates. With that, Mark, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Thank you for that. And it's great to have people here again for this RegTech Liaison Forum. And I'm really excited about talking with some of our RegTech colleagues who have been part of the BRII project with us. Now, just before introducing them and getting into a quick conversation with them, I was going to just walk through 3 slides to give you a little bit of context to build on what Danielle has just said in her opening comments. So, Judy, if we could go to the next slide. So, in short, the Department of Industry and Science and Resources is the federal government department that administers the Business Research and Innovation Initiative program. So over years, they've provided grants to a number of technology startup scale-ups to assist potentially develop solutions for government-related problems. Now, they initiated a round on BRII focused on RegTech, and ASIC was one of the 4 government and regulatory agencies identified to put forward a problem to invite RegTechs to deal with. And as Danielle pointed out, we put forward a problem around corporate disclosures. And there was over 70 applicants, and some of those are here today as part of the RegTech Association membership. And I want to thank all those applicants who put their hand up to be part of this process. What's happened so far is that 5 RegTechs were successful to work with the ASIC over a 3-month period, which finished a couple of months ago or a few months ago, which was called the feasibility phase, looking at our problem. And so before going to the next slide, so that's happened, the feasibility phase, and then those 5 RegTechs were invited to apply for the next phase, where 2 would be successful to maybe get up to $1 million each to continue to work with ASIC on a minimum viable product to our problem. And so that's what we're all waiting with bated breath to the decision about the next step. And again, I wish to thank the RegTechs who are here and noting that, the context within which they're doing that, and I really thank them for doing that. If I move to the next slide, just to emphasize what Danielle said, our problem was around corporate disclosure, and there's any number of obligations that listed companies and entities are subject to, and that includes, amongst other things, the continuous disclosure obligation. So we had a simple problem. Can you deal with that subjective challenge of trying to identify whether price-sensitive information or other information that should be revealed to the market has been made? So what are the indicators of perhaps an absence of a disclosure or a disclosure that is not fulsome or complete, or perhaps misleading in relation to that, that obligation and other obligations as identified on this slide? So we have already market surveillance capabilities, but this was really going to bolster our capacities with a sort of text analytics, natural language processing, big data analytics over what's been said or not been said in relation to our listed entities. So that was our problem, and we saw it as being a representative problem. So solutions to this could really shine a light on solutions for other problems that ASIC's dealing with, or other agencies, or importantly for the business sector itself. So this capacity could be used for businesses in their compliance, and or for perhaps investors or market participants in their own watching of the marketplace. And if I just go to the next slide, please. So as I indicate, where we're at is we're waiting for the decision on the two regtechs that will continue to work with us, and it will be for around 12 months to work for us on a minimum viable product. And we're hoping that this can be a really support to our activities. It's all directed to trying to promote market integrity and investor confidence on an enhanced basis in our financial markets. So that's enough of those slides, I think, Judy. And now let me introduce 4 of the regtechs who are here today. And we are very lucky to have with us John Daly from Listcorp, David Barros from Digitalx, Gianluca Garbellotto from Pyxta, and Ross Pearson from DHI-AI. My apologies, Gianluca. I always just call you Gianluca. I've rarely had to pronounce your surname, so I know I've made a big mistake there.
You did a great job.
Oh, yes. So they are the 4 regtechs are here, and as Danielle pointed out, Bedrock AI is the 5th who couldn't be present today, and I do have some observations from them on some of the questions I'm going to ask. So what we thought for this community, the regtech community today, is that these regtechs here have got stories to tell in relation to this initiative and their experience with it, which I think will be useful and helpful for all regtechs as they're thinking about dealing with problems and challenges in their business models, as well as for firms that are wanting to work with regtechs in dealing with their problems. So without further ado, how about we get into it? And I think, John, you're getting the first question, and I invite each one of the regtechs to maybe just say a little bit briefly about themselves and their business too, but if you could keep that brief so we can try to do all this in about 30 minutes. I'm going to pitch a question to one of the regtechs and then ask the other regtechs to just chime in if they've got something they want to supplement it with. So John, against that backdrop of the BRII program, are you able to give a sense of, well, what were your expectations in relation to this program, and to the degree that, you know, what you've experienced is in any way sort of been consistent with those expectations?
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And look, it was certainly an incredible privilege to participate in the program to date. And you know, I think trying to think back to before the program, after we were, you know, we found out that we were accepted, to what we were expecting. Not having participated in anything like this before, it's a bit difficult to think of specifics. But I remember 2 very strong general expectations. One was that we were about to experience an incredibly hard task. And I guess the clue was in the term challenge. The fact that this hasn't been solved to date, the fact that you know, there's an enormous amount of subjectivity involved in the assessment of disclosures, the fact that you know, the technical people that we were working with, you know, in our case there was a professor, a couple of PhDs, software engineers, had little understanding of the market. And I had, you know, sort of not a great deal of understanding of machine learning, natural language processing, meant that, you know, we really had to try very hard to find that overlap to bring together those disciplines. And so I think, you know, expecting it to be hard was right, because it was incredibly difficult. And I think when you layer on top of that a very compressed timetable, a relatively small amount of resources, you're really forced to make a lot of difficult decisions quickly with insufficient information. So it certainly was a challenge. The other thing that I remember clearly was expecting it to be invigorating, and it was absolutely that. It was an incredibly stimulating period of trying to develop something new with new technology applied to an old problem, but clearly one that hasn't been solved to date. So yeah, both of those expectations were certainly fulfilled.
Thank you, John. Can I just ask whether any of the other RegTechs would like to add any comments? Just chime in.
I guess I'll echo what John said, that absolutely I was expecting an all-in sprint from when we started, and it absolutely was that, which is in some ways quite liberating. You've committed that time to focus on one problem only, and I really enjoyed that from that perspective. And it's amazing what you can accomplish when you do that rather than spreading yourself thin. The other thing I might add is it's rare that you get the opportunity to have this insight on an industry problem. And I guess coming into it, I was expecting that this would be a great opportunity to learn much more about an industry that we don't normally work in. And it's difficult to develop against a problem and break into an industry. So that was something that I thought was a great opportunity. I suppose that's one of the other questions, but coming into this, I recall thinking that this was a great opportunity for us. There was two things I was uncertain about coming in, and that was the problem was quite broad. It was quite a big challenge space, and I was uncertain exactly where we would end up lying within that space in terms of delivering a best fit. So there was a bit of uncertainty coming in as well, I guess I'm saying.
Thank you, Ross. And I might just say, Bedrock's quick answer to this was a little bit like John's. We were expecting a hard problem, and we were expecting to have to try to develop a prototype on addressing poor disclosure. So that was the sort of comment they made. Okay, I might move to the next question, which they all do overlap and build on to some degree. But David, if I could direct this question to you about the benefits of participating in this program, and I suppose John and Ross have touched on that, but would you like to expand on that? And again, any of the other RegTechs, please supplement that. So over to you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think for me, working in product management, it really reinforced that all great technology solutions start with a really deep understanding of their user. And to that extent, one of the great benefits of the program was being able to have both direct and regular feedback from a real user, being ASIC. And so that enabled us to understand really deeply what those pain points were, the existing solutions that may have already been tried, and gave us the ability to understand which proposed solution might be the most valuable. For a little bit of context, at Digitalx, we have a RegTech product called Drawbridge that serves listed companies to digitally manage their internal share trading policies. And so we were looking at ASIC as, Mark said, a representative example of how we might be able to serve that customer segment with additional value through features that might help them make better disclosures. One of the other benefits was closer collaboration with our project partners. So we worked with UWA and the ASX and had a really great time working with them. I think, as John alluded to, there's this need for overlap where it's very rare that you have the one person that's both an expert in financial markets regulation and computer science and machine learning. So that really forced a really close working relationship. And in particular, our PhD student and his professor, Lai Huang and Dirk Bauer, gave us really excellent inputs into how, from an academic perspective, a lot of these issues were already being thought about and what some of the research and analysis techniques were. And then thirdly, I think the other benefit was, I think it was just as important to think critically about the process that you took to undertaking this challenge as the actual solution or the output of the challenge itself. So for Digitalx, it was really beneficial in the sense that we got to refine the way that we engage and iterate and very quickly try different things and measure what we think in a highly uncertain environment has the best opportunity of being successful.
Thank you, David. Thanks for those observations. So again, may I invite the other Regtechs if they wanted to add something?
From our end, this is Gianluca Garbellotto. You did a great job with my name, which is difficult even by Italian standards. But I mean, obviously, this was a great experience. We are an early stage startup, and one of the things that stands out to me among the other benefit that we gain from this is that basically we got funding to have an opportunity to verify that product market fit. That usually is a very intensive, cost-intensive trial and error process. In this case, we had the resources, we had the audience, we had access to expertise that it couldn't be more relevant, and that was true along the whole length of the project. I have to thank ASIC and all the subject matter experts. I have to thank ASX. We had access to data and insights that otherwise would be very difficult to achieve. So that is definitely one. And the other is that the whole initiative, the whole program is structured in a way that so you get initial funding, and it is meaningful funding. It's not peanuts, right? And you get to use that money to develop your demo and hopefully go to the next phase. But also you have the opportunity, if you are strategic about it, and I understand it doesn't apply to everybody, but it was the case for us, you can develop something that is actually a valuable add-on to your offering, to your platform, and so much so that we already picked up a client that is not in the supervision space, but leverages the same technology that we developed for the demo for something else. So those are takeaways that will generate value for us much beyond the horizon of the program.
Thank you, Gianluca. Okay, I might move to the next question, and again, they all relate, but in this case, what were some of the challenges of the program? And I know I've heard earlier my word, it was a hard problem, but in this case, I think I'm going to, just bear with me, Gianluca. I think you're kicking us off on what were some of the challenges of the program.
Yeah, well, I have to say that it was a very positive experience, and it was very well thought through. It is difficult to find faults, and some of the comments from the other participants before me echo the same. So I would be hard pressed to find real roadblocks or challenges that we experience. If I had to pinpoint something, and just because it was our challenge, our only challenge, basically, okay, it is a difficult problem and all those things, so I'm not talking about that. In terms of the actual way in which the program is structured, more I'm thinking, our challenge was finding the right balance for the demo between the theoretical side of things, the methodology, the approach, explaining and making sure that that is well developed and understood, and an actual prototype. So we changed our approach to this along the way several times based on the feedback that we were giving. I think part of it is due to the terminology, right? It's a feasibility study, and then phase 2 is a proof of concept. So one, especially if you are working with something that is novel and not really mainstream, even in the non-mainstream field of machine learning and artificial intelligence, if that's the case, you may be tempted to give more weight to the methodology, to the theory, to explaining what you're trying to achieve, rather than actually showing what you're going to achieve. So that was our challenge, totally mitigated by the fact that you have continuous access to the agency that leads the program, to the subject matter experts, totally open to feedback. So if you ask the right question, you will get the right answers, and that mitigates the challenge. But that was our experience. That's the only thing we probably struggled with a bit, especially at the beginning.
Thank you, Gianluca. And I suppose I'm just going to pick up a little bit of a flavour of that. I do remember some of you mentioning that at various points, certainly when, having to put applications up and assess, and demonstrations, that it was a bit like exam time again. So I think you touched on that. So, and I have my nightmares about exams still to this day. Can I open the floor again to see whether any other reg techs wanted to add something about the challenges of the program, and by all means comment on the challenges of the problem too.
One thing I would add, Mark, is that I think the time constraint, given the breadth of the problem, I think was a challenge. I think that the problem could have been approached in so many different ways, and there's so many different elements that could still be addressed. But given that we had 3 months, we really had to make choices around what we wanted to focus on and how best to do that to fulfill the obligations of the feasibility study. So I'm pretty sure that was by design,
Yes.
to force us into making the best choices. And I think but it was really difficult. But it was certainly something we spent a lot of time on. And but as I've kept saying to our guys, the only thing we can't do is make a choice. We've got to pick a horse and back it. And I think there was no time, if you got that choice wrong, to go back and try another one.
Yep.
But as I say, I'm sure that was part of the design, and it was certainly very effective.
Thank you, John. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. It was really a series of problems within a problem, and picking the right one was part of the difficulty. I think because you've already at that point invested a lot of time into an application for round one, you almost have to unlearn your assumptions about what you thought the solution could be, and then take a step back and really take a listening approach to seeing what ASIC or whoever the sponsor of the challenge may be already doing or has already tried before. So that was, definitely one of, I think it was a feature though, not a bug. So.
Thanks, David. And Ross, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just had a comment on the BRII program itself, and similar to Gianluca, I don't want to label this as an issue, rather an opportunity, but because of the nature of it being a challenge, and none of us were specifically locked into a direct contract with ASIC. ASIC was constrained in terms of what information that they could give us, and I should be clear, they were brilliant in how much they provided us, but it was still a limitation given the nature and the delicate type of information that we're dealing with, which meant that we did have to try and source a lot of information ourselves. So I think anyone who is considering doing one of these programs, which I highly recommend, it's been fantastic, as all the other performers have noted, but is that you need to be prepared to bring your own resources with you. And it is a little bit different in that regards from a normal commercial arrangement.
Thank you, Ross. And I mean, if I just touch on Bedrock, has noted something similar, they found the program fairly open-ended, and the challenge of narrowing the focus to solve the most impactful problems, which I think, David, you were highlighting amongst other people on the call. So now let's go maybe to the last question, and then we can by all means make any last observations you want to, but really it's about learnings. And I think this time I'm going to you, Ross, first, as to whether you wanted to reflect on any key learnings you've taken from the experience you've had to date in relation to the program.
Sure. So I think, and probably this is one I might have mentioned, could have mentioned this as one of the opportunities, but through this program, and I don't know if it's the BRII program or if it's ASIC, but it's opened a lot of conversations for us. And I guess part of the program, our dealings with ASIC and ASX, and also the conversations we've had with other securities commissions since. I think this is where my general thoughts come from, and I've come to realise that there's a great deal of opportunity in RegTech right now. And as Mark said, the problem that we tackled is quite representative of a lot of problems in industry. And I don't know if this is the term. I think Deborah, if Deborah Young's on the call, she'll probably coin this for me or correct this for me. But I've heard the word sort of digital transformation in regulation taking place right now, and I thoroughly believe that. So, in my opinion, this is a great time for RegTech organisations to deliver new technological solutions to an industry that's in need. So that's my takeaway.
Thank you, Ross. Did anyone else want to add something on learnings?
Yeah, I can share 2 learnings from my perspective. I think on reflection to part of what Ross has said around digital transformation, it seems to me that increasingly some of the hard problems left to be solved relate more and more to scaling human-like intelligence, where a lot of the basic business process automation has now thankfully mostly been done, which has left room for those harder problems to be solved. So, for example, reviewing thousands of ASX announcements to make subjective opinions as to their disclosure is not something that's easily programmable in black and white code. And then secondly, really just an appreciation for the dedication that ASIC do have in doing that work. I think it's easy to get stuck in the weeds of any meticulous technology project like this, but I think the higher purpose for it is really providing Australia a robust and fair financial institution, which for this challenge was a noble and very motivating objective. So yeah, definitely something I took away from that.
Thank you. And Bedrock made the observation it gave them an environment in which, or a context in which they could, I suppose, apply iteration, which I suppose is sprint-like, but a lot of iterations. And I think they've learned things around that for perhaps future exercises of a similar nature in their work. All righty, I'm going to just open the floor as to whether you had any last observations, on the program, the problem, anything else that you would like to make a comment. Just chime in.
Mark, one thing I would say is I think, one of the things we took away from it is that, it wasn't just how valuable this kind of technology can be to the role that ASIC plays, the work that investors do in analysing information, the way that companies structure their messaging to the markets. It really made us believe that this kind of technology is absolutely critical. I think we're going into a world that's going to see a proliferation of investment products, a proliferation of communication, information, both good, bad, and otherwise about those products. And that ultimately, unless you've got this kind of technology with unlimited kind of capacity to process and the objectivity with which software can analyze information, it's just something that humans aren't going to be able to do. And so I think we're heading into this, this world where, this is just going to be a fundamental part of analysing investment information, whether you're a regulator, an investor, or a company, communicating with regulators and investors.
Thank you.
And not only that, no, I mean, these considerations, I think, are very, very valid, but they apply also to other contexts, right? So if you think about enterprise information, so within an organization, the ability to apply the same kind of approach with this technology will afford opportunities that are extremely valuable. Or if you think about spaces like ESG reporting, sustainability reporting, which is the flavor of the day. Right now, we are transitioning from a situation in which anybody reports pretty much whatever they want. So there is a lot of chatter, a lot of buzz, and very little substance. But hopefully these over time will change, and as regulations kick in, that ratio will be unbalanced towards less buzz and more substance. So the ability to detect these trends and these things, I think, is valuable in so many fields.
Thank you. I mean, maybe I'll just make a few observations. I mean, from ASIC's perspective, we were excited about this opportunity to work with RegTech on a problem like this. And I think we're quietly confident that, the next phase we can make really good progress, if not crack this problem. with the, with what we've seen to date. And so we remain excited with that prospect. It has been a tremendous opportunity for ASIC staff to work collaboratively with the Regtechs around a problem. Now, this is not the only problem we're dealing with, but this is a difficult one. And so it has meant a lot of a commitment and an alignment of the organisation to trying to invest time to develop a solution to a problem. So that's been really helpful for ASIC and its experience too. And so, as I say, I think we're really interested in the next phase, and I want to thank these Regtechs today, knowing that they're all waiting on a decision, and it's not the best. That's just the way it is. We're waiting on that decision. So I want to thank them all here today. I also just wanted to note a couple of quick comments came in. One was about whether feasibility reports would be publicly available. I don't think so. I think those feasibility reports have got commercial and confidence content in them. It's something we can take away. I think the Department of Industry do put out stories around the BRII experiences, so there may be public versions of content, but our aim here, including in the next phase, is perhaps to continue some sort of dialogue or narrative so that learnings of the experience can be shared with the wider community as well. And then I think there's an observations about dealing with the challenges of having the right training data. Well, this was one where there wasn't a lot of training data. There was a lot of market data. There was a lot of law, some guidance, and instances of poor conduct, maybe conduct not pursued, with some global analogies. But in big data term, there was not a big set of training data or problems. So that's why all of these Regtechs had to really grapple with trying to design approaches and rules logic and testing that to see whether they could iterate and develop, get somewhere along that path of having the equivalent of big training data. So thanks for those observations too. Well, with that then, I think we'll wrap up this part of the Regtech Liaison Forum. And again, a big thanks to our Regtechs who have joined us today. Thank you. And all the best for the next phase, whatever happens. And so I wanted to now invite the ACCC, who are, and I'm really pleased that the ACCC do take the opportunity of this liaison forum and take a spot from time to time to talk about consumer data right and sort of the not only the developments, but the context of Regtechs and so on being able to be participants in this evolution. So with that, I think I'm going to pass over to Evie Redshaw and Vaughn from the ACCC to take the floor.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. So as Danielle mentioned, Vaughn and I from the ACCC, my role is the Director of Analytics and Vaughn is the Director of Demand Management. If I can just get you to flick through the slide, Judy. Thank you. So today, Vaughn and I will provide a brief introduction to the consumer data right for anyone that is not quite across the regime. We'll provide an overview on our mock tools and the sandbox, which we've built to support the participants. And we'll also introduce you to our public dashboard displaying the performance and availability metrics of active data holders. So with that, I'll get you to flick through the next slide, Judy, and pass on to Vaughn.
Thanks, Evie. So for those who are not familiar with the consumer data right, it's a industry-wide rollout. So if you may have heard the term open banking. So Australia's decided to extend that concept to other sectors. So we're in the process of rolling out to the energy sector right now, which has started with product data shared earlier this month and customer data due to be shared in the middle of November. And we're preparing for the telecommunication sector to come out shortly. It's important to note that CDR is a opt-in service for consumers. So they're the ones who choose to share their data. It's not forced upon them. It's one of the key elements of CDR is that the consumer is in control of what data they share, who they share it with, and what happens to the data after the relationship is finished. I think also reflecting on sort of recent external events, it's important to note that CDR has been designed with privacy in mind. So part of that, we've got 13 privacy safeguards, which dictate how data is used and how participants operate. And some key call outs from that is that, firstly, personally identifiable information is typically excluded. So items such as date of birth are not included in the data sets. We don't include things like driver's license details, passports, or Medicare information. And we've also allowed for provisions to support participants to protect vulnerable customers. So there's specific carve-outs for data holders to take specific action where a customer has been identified as vulnerable. So gives them much more flexibility for customers in those scenarios. Judy, if I could move on to the next slide. Judy, thank you. Okay, so this is a very sort of a complex diagram, but I'll break it down quickly. So at the center of CDR is the register that you'll see down the bottom. So that's operated by the ACCC, and that dictates who can participate in CDR. So the first thing we would do would be to register a data holder. So data holder typically being a bank, or in the coming weeks, an energy retailer. We would onboard them onto the register, and we would share security tokens with them. We would then have accredited data recipients, so we have them in the system already, and they would go through an accreditation process, a series of tests, and a final decision to activate them on the register. Again, they would connect securely with the ACCC register, and then they would start to negotiate with each of the data holders using defined standards and those security tokens to establish a secure connection. And we refer to that process as dynamic client registration. At that point, the recipient's up and running. So typically the consumer would be purchasing the data recipient's offering to them. So they could be providing a variety of services from personal funds management, accounting services, or other services that would make use of the data that the consumer has sitting with their data holder, whether it's a bank or an energy provider. The consumer would consent with the data recipient for that data to be shared, and they would confirm that consent with the data holder. At that point, the data recipient can then use APIs to draw the data back from the data holder and provide the consumer with their service. So what we've got there is we've got a technical environment that's founded on APIs and industry standards around security. And to govern that for the participants and the data holders, they've got a series of reference materials from legislation, rules, compliance and enforcement policies, consumer data standards, and register standards. And we've also got additional papers to support that. So to participate in this ecosystem, both the data holders and data recipients have quite a wide variety of reference materials that they need to access in order to be active on this system. And we found when we first activated that it took a while to bed that down so the system was operating as it should. Judy, if we could click forward. This is a high level. What we have is a typical software development cycle. The blue elements, both dark and lighter blue, showed what we started out with. And a lot of the material, the support material, was what I'd say was right justified. So it was more to the end of the software development experience. What we realized is we need to close the gap on the earlier stages for participants. As a result, we decided to embark on a process, or the ACCC embarked on a process to develop some open source tools and the CDR sandbox, and the data standards body started to develop test scenarios. So it's all about supporting participants much earlier in the life cycle to make it easier for them to operate. So Judy, if I could flick on. So again, so a little bit corny, but what we had is we realized that participants were focusing on compliance activity, developing software, setting up their test environments, a lot of heavy lifting. And then at the end, they were looking at providing consumer value. And this is not really where we wanted people to spend their time and money, because you're effectively dealing with commodity software code that really sits in the collaboration space. We want people out there in a competition space offering services to enrich the consumer's experience and actually benefit the Australian consumers with value. So that's why we focused on developing our mock tools. Judy, if you can flick forward. So we developed the mock tools in July 2021. So that was 12 months after the launch of CDR in 2020. And we provided mock versions of the CDR register that the ACCC runs, versions of a data holder. So it would simulate a data holder for banking, and a data recipient. So what that provided is a reference interpretation of the standards. They had working software. They could simulate the industry environment within their own system, and they could access information and guidance material online. And what that was designed to do was, whether it was a data holder meeting their compliance obligation or a data recipient looking to bring a solution to market or test what the market could support, we saw this as a way to accelerate the support tools required in a complex technical environment. And this is our first stage of providing open source software. It was very new to the ACCC, and we needed to work through that process. But we wanted to take this further in the development of a sandbox. So Judy, if I could quickly flick forward. So we started developing, and we launched in July of 22 a working simulated environment that the ACCC manages. So this allows both data holders and current and prospective data recipients to operate it in a simulated environment. They can interact either with the mock versions of the tools or with other simulated participants. And what we've been able to do is get this environment up and running. It's still in the early stages, but we're starting to see some interesting feedback from participants as they begin to use this sandbox and use it as a proxy for testing. We've also found it useful for some of our own systems that we provide, and it gives us feedback as to where some of the complexity sits within the system and how we might be able to further extend our mock solutions to assist participants. So again, still at a very early stage, but we see it as an important milestone in CDR to enable the development of consumer offerings in the marketplace. So I'll stop there. That was a very quick journey on CDR and some of the tools that the ACCC has provided. And now I'll hand over to Evie, who'll take us through some of the reporting that we've also embarked on. Thanks, Evie.
Thanks, Vaughn. So the ACCC uses three key data sources to monitor performance within the CDR ecosystem. We use a biannual reporting where data holders and data recipients provide compliance reporting focused on complaints received, data sharing refusals, and high-level statistical information. We also use incident data where the ACCC facilitates resolution of issues between participants and supports the participants with technical issues collaboratively. And we also use the performance metrics as received through an API on a daily basis. So what we did here, we leveraged the experience from the UK's open banking regime, where they currently publish metrics on a monthly basis, which help to drive some of their participant conformance. So if I can flick forward, Judy. Thank you. So in December 2021, we commenced publishing a subset of performance and availability data, and we've since then iteratively enhanced the view and expanded the data that we publish. The team considered this, I guess, a way of promoting innovation in regulation, or as Ross mentioned before, digital transformation in regulation. So I guess by publishing the updated data on a daily basis, the ACCC has been able to promote self-regulation and encourage competition across data holders. So in this view, as you can see, the red indicates whereby a data holder sits outside of the thresholds as determined by the consumer data standards for the filtered timeframe, noting that the consumer data standards are quite specific. Therefore, the dashboard is not about addressing non-compliance in the regime. Click forward, please, Judy. Thank you. So this publication has assisted the ACCC to drive a more collaborative approach with participants in supporting resolution with technical issues. However, it also promotes visibility on the technical experience from a consumer's perspective, things such as looking at the average availability, how often the systems are available, and how fast they take to respond to those API calls. Moving forward, the ACCC is continuously looking at ways to iterate on this view, especially as new designated sectors come on board and new versions of the consumer data standards are released, and most importantly, feedback that we get from the users of these dashboards. So we highly encourage anyone to go through the cdr.gov.au website and provide us some feedback or ideas on what they'd like to see for future iterations on this. Anything you wanted to add to that one, Vaughn?
No, I think that the point you added around it, it drives a lot of self-governance around this. So we know that participants, everyone likes to have the best shop in town, and this is a public view of who may be better than someone else. So, so we let that internal competition drive activity, which is proving to see some changes. I think, Evie, you saw some recent changes in performance metrics that seem to fix itself.
Yeah, we did. So looking at that average availability, if we go back in the data set, we're able to see just the most two recent months of September and October. The average availability of the systems has all been within the compliance standards. So it's been really good to see this self-promotion of regulation and see that uptake increase. And I guess the data holders have the access to see this on a daily basis. It's a huge milestone for you know, the consumer data right, especially when we look at UK's open banking on a monthly basis. They're sharing their data. This is on a daily basis. So really good for data holders to be able to see how they compare up against others and against themselves as they improve.
Well, thank you, Vaughn and Evie. Thank you. So just so I confirm, are the slides available that we could distribute later? Is it okay? And I think importantly, you've highlighted, Vaughn, the context in which there's environments for people to test in, and hopefully there's people here in this audience today who may well be very interested in that. So clearly, I'm sure there's lots of information on your webpage, but that's a point of them if they're not so familiar with that. And I think, Evie, you've demonstrated the power of analytics and use of data. And it could be that you know, you're at your early days, but people may want APIs to this sort of thing in the future, and so on. So the interest in data as a tool for lots of reasons, including, as you're saying, trying to promote competition within the markets with that information there. So I can't see any questions. I'm going to remind people, if you do have questions, by all means add them in the chat at any point, and we'll try to get to them. And can I just check, Vaughn and Evie, are you available through to the end in case anyone does come up with questions and raises them at the end? I can see a nod. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you for that. So thank you, ACCC, and thanks again for taking this spot and bringing us up to speed on things. So now, thank you patiently, Deborah and Ben. So Deborah Young from the Regtech Association and Ben Hobby from Objective Corporation. If we could give the floor to you now, I think there's a few observations you want to make about, surveys and latest developments in the Regtech sector. Anything else you want to highlight? So over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. And thank you for having us today. I'll introduce Ben more formally in a second, but if you don't mind, I'll just kick off with the next slide. Thank you very much, Judy. I just wanted to flag with people on the line that our brand new industry research called our Industry Perspective report is due out in a few weeks. There's some really encouraging signs, though, in that report, including that an interesting finding that 53% of the survey respondents are primarily serving financial services, and 35% are serving regulators or government. So I'll leave that with you to reflect on, but I think that is showing this growing demand that we've been actually hearing about in all of the sessions leading up to this point this afternoon, that there's definitely growth in appetite from government and regulators. So please do watch out for Industry Perspective report. We are continuing to roll out our successful online programs, and they are doing very well. And you can see, as I've said there, the government and regulators are a focus this financial year, as are our friends in the mutual banking sector. We founded a few months ago a new group called the Tech Collective, and it's seven industry tech associations that have come together to really collaborate more closely and also offer government and regulators, for that matter, a one-stop shop to come and address all of us at once rather than having to knock on 7 different doors. We are running an event next week where we will bring members of those 7 associations together. Our Gala Awards dinner is also on next week, which will really celebrate achievements in the industry. There are a few seats left. The keynote speaker for that event will be Victor Dominello, who's the Minister for Customer Service and Digital Government. The next couple of weeks are very exciting for the association. We will not only be attending, but I'm also speaking at and moderating a whole stream of sessions at Singapore FinTech Festival. So please do reach out to me if you're going to be up there. We'd love to connect with you, because whilst we are there, we are taking our RegTech member showcase on the road, and we will be showcasing members' RegTech capabilities at ING in Singapore. So please do contact us if you'd like to participate in that. And then following that, we'll be bouncing straight over to New York City, where we'll be participating in an Austrade landing pad, which has been specifically developed for RegTechs. And likewise, the RegTech Association will be running an event at Accenture in New York for our members to present to the broader US community. And that is a first for us, the first in the United States. So fantastic. And we are looking to go across to the UK in June next year. Watch for dates for Accelerate RegTech 2023. It's looking likely to be the end of April, and we hope to be able to announce something there soon. And my final point, which I've kind of already mentioned, and is really the perfect segue into the next part of our presentation this afternoon, and that is we are seeing real appetite from government and regulatory agencies right now. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Judy. I wanted to take a moment to introduce Ben Hobby for those of you that haven't met Ben. Ben is the Global Vice President of RegTech for Objective Corporation. And I think what has been really important to Ben and his team over the last little while is ensuring that they had evidence base for some of the work that they do and the software that they develop. And as luck would have it, Ben has also worked in the 2017 round of the BRII program, so can bring some of those interesting insights and what he learned to our discussion today. But what I thought would be really good is if we could just unpack a little bit about some of the reasons behind why Ben and his team did the survey that they did of regulators in Australia and New Zealand, and a little bit about the focus of that survey. So welcome, Ben, to the ASIC Regtech Liaison Forum.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone today, virtually, but I feel a little bit blessed that we can sit in an office face to face, once more. How great is that? So we issued this survey to all regulators across New Zealand and Australia earlier this year, in the hope that we could uncover what are the challenges they've got, what are the barriers that they have, but what are they using RegTech for? Or maybe what have they started using RegTech for but haven't really fully deployed? How does it align to their digital strategies? So there's a lot that we really didn't know, because mostly what you see are the headlines. There's a nice bit of AI being used for something, over here, or there's a IoT device over here that's been used for something else. But we didn't know enough about the detail on a broad spectrum of what government was using. And very pleased to see what the responses were, because we had a high number of responses. And we saw that across New Zealand national government, Australian federal, and all the Australian states and territories. So a very wide and decent spread, which gave us just a great snapshot overall.
Right.
So maybe we can just in briefly, just in a few minutes here, just cover probably the top 3 findings that we found. And for the audience on the call today, we'll be able to share the link of where you can get this full report. It's complimentary and it's very comprehensive. It's a 45-page report. There's a lot of data, a lot of insights in here. But as far as the top 3, the first one was about data sharing. And what we know is that out of everyone we surveyed, everyone considers that data sharing is very high on the agenda. The complexity of the regulatory environments that we're seeing that government agencies have to deal with is just increasing all the time. However, the number of agencies that are actually doing this successfully is still very, very low. So there's a long way to go with actual adoption and successful uses of data sharing interagency. Go to the next slide, please, Judy. One of the second insights that we saw, and we asked regulators what would be the biggest benefit that they could gain from a successful implementation of Regtech for them. Kind of what was their dream. We outlined what 10 potential adoption areas might be, and we asked all the regulators to rate those. And you can see by far and away, these were the top 3 responses, by the way. By far and away, the number 1 is that streamlining the benefits for regulated entities, and meaning the potential uplift that you could see by a government agency using Regtech successfully, and the knock-on impact streamlining through the whole ecosystem is by far and away the highest potential uplift. And there's lots more detail in the full report that focuses on this. But we wanted to reflect, I guess, a little bit on maybe this is why you see the key themes of whole of government digital strategies that you see a lot more of these days, and maybe where the funding priorities are also. Next slide, Judy. And finally, the adoption of technology to transform a key portion of what agencies do, and this is federally, nationally in New Zealand, and state and territories. Permitting and licensing is such a key function, right? We got very used to this, like during COVID, because we're seeing apps where your vaccination certificate started to appear. Yes. And then you started to use a QR code to check in. These things became, very commonplace in our lives where they weren't before. And I have to say, the services agencies across states and territories did an amazing, job of rolling that out very quickly. Across the board, though, and more broadly, as you can see by the results of the survey, most consider that these things, again, are very important, but still have a very low adoption rate. I think the most promising thing from this is that 44% of all the respondents said that they were trialling these types of solutions now. So you see this a wave that's up and coming for what you're going to see for the likes of one of the biggest problems as consumers that we have is that you can't see what the status of an application is. As you go through, whereas in our consumer lives, you could send a parcel from Manila to London, and you'll get a text of what's happening all along the way. Yes. But if I go to apply, for example, for a firearms license, I'm in the dark throughout the process, and it's very clunky.
Yes, yes. Now I know it'd be good to hear some of your case studies, but just reflecting back on this data that you've collected, can you give us an idea, a smattering of, so this included regulators in financial services, but also other regulatory agencies. Can you give us some examples of the kind of, without naming names of agencies, but kind of, the breadth of who they represented, for example?
Very, very broad. So everything that you can imagine in financial services.
Yeah.
And then for everything else across government, you're talking about maritime, health and safety, liquor and gambling, child protection, social agencies, like right across the board. Is very, very wide on the responses, which I think just speaks to the quality of the results. And we're already seeing that this data is being used for business cases as to why you should push forward with Regtech.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we should move on to your quick case studies, because I do have one final question for you, and I know where.
If we go to the next slides, Judy, this is the final one, for us. I guess, a shout out to all those that came on today that were part of the BRII program. And what Deborah mentioned was back in 2017, I can give a bit of hope to those who are participating in the program, because, fast forward 5 more years, we went through the feasibility study in 2017, and then a extended proof of concept, 15 months. And we then went through a commercialization process. And this platform, it's called Objective Reach, is now live right across the nation. And it's a stunning example, because it's not just a first for Australia, this is a first for the world. And in short, what it is now doing is every single child protection agency in this country, because every state and territory has their own, and some of them have multiple systems.
Yes.
All of those data sets now can be interrogated without breaking any privacy or security, and you can get a single view of what's happening of a child or a family right across the nation, no matter where they might have been. And so you build up a case very, very quickly. And whereas previously it took on average government agencies 16 weeks to find out basic information, using this platform, they can now do that in less than 60 seconds. It's literally life-changing and life-saving for children and families that are under abuse in this country. So very proud that Regtech can have that kind of impact. It's also having an impact in other areas. And I mentioned the licensing for firearms, because right now the police in New Zealand are right in the middle of deploying a new national registry, and they have one Regtech solution as a complete end-to-end from licensing and the interaction with anybody that's applying for a license or renewing, through to compliance and through to enforcement. It's all in a single view. So there's nowhere to hide, for people that are trying to avoid things. And they've got a much better control over things.
And this is perfect then, because this goes to the heart of what the Regtech Association have always been advocating for, is that Regtech can solve big problems in financial services, but it can also solve very big problems for citizens, that everybody can relate to these fantastic case studies. Now we've got less than a minute left, but I wanted to ask you about your Regtech and global scale. And I know you've just spent some time in the UK recently. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're intending to do over there and what you think the opportunity is? And in particular for those Regtechs on the line, to talk a little bit about what you see the opportunities are in the UK.
If you thought the opportunity was big here, the UK is enormous. It's a very, very like market situation, meaning the legislation's very similar, the way that laws are passed and the way that industry interacts with government, all of that is very, very similar to here. Amazingly, but I think your stats have always proved this, Deborah, Australia is actually light years ahead when it comes to particularly the non-financial sector side of Regtech for government. So there is an enormous appetite and very little by the way of specialist solutions that are out there from what we've seen in the marketplace. And they have some fledgling organisations like the Institute of Regulation that's over there, and they can only dream of doing what the Regtech Association has already done for a number of years. So whilst the RTA is now spreading globally, they're still just really beginning. But the huge appetite we saw witnessed by, we had one event that was at Australia House up at the Strand in London, and we had 39 regulators that just showed up and have high interest, but another 60 said, we really love this, can't make it on that day, but can you please keep us informed and keep us part of this community. So huge appetite, very, very young and fledgling stage compared to how mature that we are here.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think we've run out of time, but thank you very much to ASIC for providing us with this opportunity and hopefully giving all the RegTechs out there some hope that there is some global scale to be had. And I just want to applaud you, because I just, just listening to the BRII program participants really heartens me to think and see and touch and feel how far we've come over the last 5 years. So back to you, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Ben, and thanks for the update, as well as those observations and, I suppose, inspirations, I think, from Ben and Deborah about opportunities and what's going on, which is just demonstrating the power of RegTech. So thank you. Now, I've been monitoring queries. I'm just going to confess that I haven't seen any further questions come in. So I think we've had a fairly expansive presentation of things today. I suppose what I'm going to just suggest again, remind to people, is this liaison forum is an opportunity for all in the sector to knock on our door and give us ideas for things to put on the agenda and or things they want to have presented or be parts of panels. So we are always open to ideas on that. So, and we are looking forward to being hybrid next year, people and virtual. So yeah, at least that first meeting, hopefully. So I think without further ado, I just want to thank all the attendees. And I've seen the numbers have held on pretty strongly throughout the event. So there's been a lot of good content here for the membership and the attendance and the community. And I also want to thank all the presenters today for their time and effort and observations. And with that then, I think we'll just finish up, and slides will be available, and any ideas, go to the Innovation Hub and just shoot us an email to the Innovation Hub email address, and we'll take on that on board. So wishing you all well for the busy months ahead until the end of the year. Thank you.